Hello. So, we Occidental nations have tended to compartmentalize Oriental nations and vice versa. We've basically looked at one another's culture as not only distinct, but also unmoving, weird, and altogether other. When we think of Japan, what do we think of? Whoa, go back a few? There we go, horror cinema. Now then, this video will try to avoid generalizing about certain tropes and patterns associated with J-horror, but it's hard not to notice the differences, especially if those differences are what made them attractive to us over here. So why was there a slight transfer of interest around the turn of the millennium to foreign horror thriller cinema? Could it have had something to do with the so-called Miramax effect, with that distributor driving an insane amount of marketing to internationally produced films way back when? Well, perhaps not, if the claims of them delaying their releases of Asian movies are anything to go by. Was it something to do with stagnation in the genres at home, such as the already talked about demise of iconic slashers? Maybe so, but what I find interesting is that the influences worked both ways. Not surprising really. America is a pretty massive and influential bastard of a nation, so of course some of its ideas would make their way east, especially following the Allied occupation. As an example, films like Seven Samurai were a twist on the old westerns. Lots of mutual chasing away of bandits. Coming back to the primary topic of this video, of course Japanese horror cinema has existed for about as long as their film industry has, and of course it's developed over time. Back in the 50s they gave us Godzilla and other gigantic monsters, and kind of led with that for a while. In the 80s they delved into body horror, with the likes of Tetsuo the Iron Man, and the infamous Guinea Pig series. Yes, the thing that Charlie Sheen and the FBI mistook for snuff. And for the longest time there have been supernatural elements, namely vengeful and evil spirits. Again, not to speak in generalities, but these are the more prevalent aspects of the genre that one can point to. Horror villains such as Sadako, Kayako, and Kuchiseke Onna, aka the slit-mouthed woman, strike enough of a balance between familiarity and the unknown to be intriguing to Western audiences. What the hell is that? It's just standing there. Why is it moving so slowly? Is it a ghost? Haunting the... Oh, furious woman scorns, evil demon spirit thing. Unfinished business. Okay, I'm listening. The 1990s, also known as the Lost Decade in Japan, was a period of fear and uncertainty. The economy suffered, the Tokyo subway was devastated by an act of terrorism, and more jobs were made obsolete by advancing technologies. What we might call contemporary J-horror deals with certain themes. Isolation, loss of identity, some evil shade of modern tech. The same sorts of themes which have been bolstering up psychological thrillers and horrors over here. Let us examine, in no particular order, some Japanese horror from the 90s which utilizes said themes. Perhaps the closest thing to a gritty and sophisticated Western-style thriller, Perfect Blue is a 1997 anime which contains elements of psychological horror. It follows a young woman named Mima, a former pop idol who tries to make it as a serious actress and loses herself along the way. This one is fairly well known to Western audiences, and it really deserves to be. The animation is pretty stunning, the score is suitably eerie and percussive, and the tone echoes that of many of our best thrillers. Heck, the show Mima's acting in Double Bind has this going on.
Do you have any idea why the culprit peels off the skin of his victims? He wants to become one.
Forgive me. Become what?
A woman.
I couldn't give you credit for this, could I, Buffalo Bill?
Would you?
Once again we see the theme of losing one's identity and being distinctly haunted by something. Mima has recurrent delusions involving her former pop idol self, which cause her to fear for her sanity as well as her personal safety. The film can also be seen as an attack on rampant commercialism, something which is common across the East and West. No wonder we liked it. But the main reason I bring it up is because it dives into the horror of technology. Mima has never so much as touched a computer before, but once it's up and running, she discovers a blog written by her imposter, which really doesn't help the whole sanity thing. Audition 1998 was directed by the controversial Takeshi Miike and tells the story of a widower whose sneaky friend arranges for him to meet his future wife by means of an audition. Aoyama becomes smitten with a woman called Asami, and luckily she likes him too. Up till a certain point, the movie is presented as a romantic drama with only slightly worrying implications. Here is that certain point. Yup, that's not very encouraging. Now, Asami is a woman who's been treated harshly by men her entire life, including Aoyama, who sees her in terms of meeting the prerequisites to be his future bride. The woman scorned or else horribly repressed or abused is a common aspect of Japanese horror. Asami isn't a wrathful spirit in this case, but she does exact revenge on the men in her life with girlish glee, and she is clothed in white, which is either a gesture towards her former innocence, or meant to be reminiscent of traditional funeral attire. I assume. It's a yurei thing. Again, not saying that Asami is a Yurei, she'd have to be dead for that. This movie subverts the expectation that Asami will turn out to be a ghost, and this decade did like it some subversive horror. This film might also have been attractive to Western audiences because it presents us with unconventional scenes of torture, as well as ideologically unsettling scenes. I mean, holy socks on a surfboard. Speaking of extreme cinema, 1996 gave us Naked Blood. This film concerns a young scientist who invents an anesthetic which can convert pain to pleasure, and his 3 unwitting test subjects. Much bodily mutilation ensues. This film probably convinced many moviegoers that Japanese cinema was totally bonkers. Truth be told, the telepathic cactus is a little odd, but the rest of this story is at least comprehensible. It's one of few cannibalistic films to come out of Japan, which was interesting to me because the director had previously employed famed real-life cannibal Issei Sagawa to be in one of his films. Perhaps he had a morbid fascination with the topic. Anyway, this film has hints of body horror as well as a preoccupation with technology. Note the VR headset with which Rika communicates with her cactus and murders Iji, the protagonist. Sewn throughout the film is a terrible sense of science going too far. One of the major flaws of the film, however, is the over-the-top sound design. Yeah. Finally, we come to the most culturally significant J-horror movie of the 90s, Hideo Nakata's The Ring, also known as Ringu. Based on a book of the same name, this film is about a female reporter investigating a videotape which guarantees the death of its viewer within 7 days. Which, on paper, makes it much easier to avoid than, say, the Videodrome broadcast. Anyway, Reiko, and later her son, watch the tape and are given 7 days to live, and the race is on to solve the mystery of this terrible curse. Now, the creator of this tape is known here as Sadako, who was in life a young girl with powers even greater than her psychic mother's. Sadako is not just a Yurei, but more specifically an Onryo. And she certainly appears to be, with her white dress, long dark hair, and colourless face. She is markedly different from most Western horror villains, not only in terms of her appearance, but also the way she moves and operates. She is a character who goes for victims at her own pace, unmindful of the protections which technology is meant to offer. She crawls slowly, as opposed to jump-scaring her victims and by extension the audience. There is a lot to be said for the exquisite tension building in The Ring, which is emblematic of much of Japanese horror. We saw it, and we wanted it for ourselves. The original Ring was brought to Vertigo Films in the US by director Roy Lee and adapted for audiences who may not have dug all the subtitles. Crucially, the reason why The Ring is so important is that the American remake came back to Japan making, and I quote, "more money there in 2 weeks than Nakata's original Ringu had done in its whole run." This is what kicked off the J-horror trend. Japanese filmmakers were encouraged to make these kinds of films in the hopes that they'd get distributed and remade in the States. With the 2000s, or the noughties, or whatever the hell we're calling that decade, there came a slew of American remakes of Asian horror movies. The Grudge, One Missed Call, The Ring, Pulse, Dark Water, The Uninvited, and many more. Although some of these came from Southeast Asia, Korea, Hong Kong, Singapore, most came from Japan. These would continue with the theme of marrying supernatural entities with modern-day technological appliances. Cairo was about spirits trying to enter our world through the internet, One Missed Call was a ghostly attack on our mobile phones, and The Ring was... I was going to say going after the now defunct VHS format, but whatever. You keep doing you, Lee. In my opinion, the best-case scenario in all of this is that the rise of Japanese horror managed to reinvigorate one nation's idea of horror cinema, and also reaffirm the cultural identity of the other. And also scare the knickers off everybody.